Pac Man is a game most people will first think of when talking about arcade franchises, especially in the United States. In the late 70s, Namco decided that they wanted to enter the growing video game industry after buying what was left of Atari Japan. Among the original group of developers was one Toru Iwatani, who would not only go on to create Namco's first ever game GB, but after producing a few sequels to said game, decided he wanted to take a different direction. He had come to notice that arcades had gotten not only men-centric, but also not the nicest place to hang out. So his plan was to focus his next project on women, hoping that it would encourage more women and couples to show up to arcades to give them a better look. The secondary goal was to offer a more lighthearted, colorful game to contrast with the overly violent nature at the time. The idea for Pac Man came from what Toru believed women liked most, which was eating dessert. The name, derived from paku paku taburu, which is the act of opening and closing your mouth repeatedly. Pac Man himself is designed partly based on the shape of a pizza with a slice missing, while also resembling the Japanese character for mouth. Development of the game lined up with the development of Galaxian, which marked the revolution of a colored screen. Toru used this as his advantage by adding even more colors into the game and reinforcing the non-violent nature. Pac Man was released to test audiences in 1980 under the name Pac Man, and although general arcade audiences didn't really like it, the intended audience of gaming newcomers really enjoyed it. After getting a wide release in Japan, popularity quickly picked up and Namco decided to try and move it to the West. Before it was shown off to potential buyers, Namco America's branch requested two changes. The game's name had to be changed, and the ghosts' names had to be changed. The former was due to the name Pac Man being very easily changed by prospective vandals, and the latter being to give them English names. While Pac Man struggled slightly against Namco's own Galaxian in Japan, there was no such problem in the Americas. Pac Man still holds its title as the most successful coin-op game. Of course, with such success came many different sequels, a TV adaptation, and more merchandise than could fill a single landfill. Pac Man and his ghosts have taken many forms and have been ported to just about anything with a screen. One of the most standout sub-series in the franchise was what Namco did in celebration of the series' 20th anniversary. This is Pac Man World. At E3 1997, Bill Anderson and his team at Namco Home Tech were showing off the next steps for the Pac Man franchise in the form of Pac Man Ghost Zone. It starred a teenager who was sucked into an arcade machine by the Ghost Lord and turned into Pac Man. It was a much more gritty take on the franchise, but unfortunately Namco was starting to sour on the project. After deliberation and an unfavorable demo, Namco Japan made the decision to not only trash all previous work done, but also fire the entire team, only holding on to one artist, one programmer, and designer Scott Rogers. The decision was made to turn the project into a platformer, inspired by earlier platformers in the series such as Pac-Land and Pac-in-Time. This version also saw the inclusion of other Namco characters, such as Taizo from Dig Dug, although they were eventually removed in favor of adding more members to the Pac family. Puka was allowed to stay though, as the character was extremely popular in Japan. The biggest thing that was missing was a voice for Pac-Man. There was a ton of internal debate on whether he should be a full-grown adult or a child, and eventually Namco made the call to simply keep him mute for this adventure. This also saved the game a ton of time and money, with less animating and voice production needing to be done. The game was once again shown off under the title Pac Man 3D at E3 1998 to a much larger reception. The following year, it was fully announced under the final title Pac Man World 20th Anniversary. The game sees Pac-Man getting his 20th birthday party interrupted when ghosts kidnap his family and take them to Ghost Island under the rule of the evil Talk Man, named after Namcot, Namco's internal console division. You, as Pac-Man, set off across Pac-Land to rescue your family and take down Talk Man. During this mission, players will not only do all of the usual running and jumping of your standard platformers, but also new additions unique to Pac-Man. The first being the butt bounce, which as the name suggests, allows players to bounce up and down, defeating enemies and smashing crates. Secondly is pellet throwing, where pellets found throughout the level could be thrown at enemies and other objects. Finally is the rev roll, which behaves similarly to Sonic's spin dash. Along the way, Pac Man will also encounter classic maze-style levels unlocked by finding a Galaxian flagship. Years later, the game was ported to the Game Boy Advance, with a few changes to the overall formula. Although the game follows the same plot and world structure, the game was instead transformed into a 2D side-scroller that also uses isometric elements to add depth to the game. Given the technical limitation, cutscenes are shown in a fluid picture format, where it's basically a slideshow but with moving parts. Pac Man World 20th Anniversary was released on the PlayStation on October 15, 1999 in North America, November 2, 1999 in Japan, and February 28, 2000 in Europe. The GBA port would release on November 16, 2004 in North America, November 26, 2004 in Europe, and skipped the Japanese release. World was received extremely well, with emphasis being placed on the graphics and gameplay especially. By 2007, the game had surpassed 1 million copies in North America alone. The GBA game fared worse, receiving far more negative reviews than its flagship counterpart. Of course, with success comes sequels, but first, there's another game that should be mentioned. After consistent fan outcry for a remake, Namco decided to put Re-Pac in development in 2020 alongside Pac Man Museum Plus. Eventually, it would be revealed in a Nintendo Direct in 2022. The biggest focus was to keep what made the game what it was, while bringing other elements up to modern standards. The game was entirely built from the ground up using Unity. A number of different elements were completely overworked, with various levels changing layouts and boss fights being rebuilt entirely. The Pac family also got a new look, with almost the entire family being replaced to reflect the current canon and remove Miss Pac-Man from the mix. A hover was also added to Pac-Man's moveset. Pac Man World Re-Pac would release on the PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox One and Series consoles, the Switch, and PC on August 26, 2022. It received all-around good reviews for its visual and gameplay upgrades, but was criticized for its lack of any meaningful innovation. Bigger criticism came from the fact that in the launch version of the game, none of the original credits were present, which was pointed out by Scott Rogers. Eventually, under fan pressure, Namco added the original credits through an update in November, alongside the game's paid DLC pack. After the success and release of the first game, development commenced on a sequel. Gameplay-wise, the game follows in the first game's steps, with all of Pac-Man's abilities making a return. On top of these, additional abilities and gimmicks were added, such as the Shrink Dot, and ice skates and rollerblades in certain levels. This game sees Pac-Man go up against the ancient ghost Spooky, after his normal ghost enemies steal the golden fruit and accidentally unseal him. Pac-Man once again travels around Pac-Land to find and reclaim the golden fruit, to reseal Spooky back under the tree. Once again, similar to the first game, World 2 also got a Game Boy Advance interpretation. This interpretation follows the same plot once again, but changes the gameplay completely. Players navigate in the same 2D side-scrolling isometric style gameplay from the first interpretation, and added onto this entry is a world map to go level to level, as well as a significant graphical upgrade from the first game. Additionally, the cutscenes are told in slideshow format rather than the more fluid ones present in the first one. Pac Man World 2 released on the Xbox, GameCube, and PlayStation 2 on all of the dates listed on screen. The Game Boy Advance port would be released a few years later, also on the dates listed on screen. Due to the criticisms of the difficulty in some sections, later releases and ports of the game would be toned down, with Namco shortening certain levels and reducing boss health. Praise was given to the overall gameplay and levels, but heavy criticism was given to the game's poor camera, which led to this game getting very mixed reviews. All three main console releases received re-releases under the respective bestseller lines, with the GameCube port also being re-released as a package with Pac Man Vs., and the PlayStation 2 version being re-released as a bundle with Pac Man World 3 and World Rally. Like the first game, we have another quick jump in time to cover before we go to the final platformer. Similar to the first remake, World 2 was once again built from the ground up. A number of levels were reworked, and all of the bosses were replaced or updated. On top of these changes were new gameplay elements, such as missions being added to levels to give an extra challenge to those who wanted it. Co-op was the other major new addition, with Player 2 being able to take control of a pack drone and help Player 1 defeat enemies or grab collectibles. A new easy mode was also added, letting a player skip certain parts of a level if they were stuck, or be invincible to all enemies and obstacles. Beyond gameplay elements, another major change was the addition of Martin Sherman reprising his role as Pac Man to add full dialogue to the game. The biggest addition overall was additional story elements. After the main game is completed, Pac-Man's kids accidentally travel back to the past after falling down a hole in the tree. Now being in the time Spooky was ruling, Pac-Man must travel Pac-Land from the past to save his kids and seal Spooky, creating a fun time loop effect on the game's main story. Pac Man World 2 Repack was released for PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox One and Series consoles, Nintendo Switch 1 and 2, and PC on September 26, 2025. It received good reviews, with high praise being given to all of the additional content that was added. Physical releases also came with a reversible cover that recreated the original art. It also received a DLC pack in the form of Sonic the Hedgehog collab, lining it up with Pac-Man's introduction into Sonic Racing Crossworld. World 3, at first, was not intended to be a new entry in the World series, but rather another 3D spin-off called Pac-Man Adventures. Working on this entry was legendary developer Don Bluth, who had drawn a handful of new designs for creatures, including characters from Dig Dug. Work also began on a mechanic where Pac-Man would be able to lose control, as inferred by other concept art. Eventually, Bluth was let go from the project and the work that had been done was reworked into what would become the third game in the Pac Man World franchise. Due to an internal restructuring, this game marked the first entry in the series not to be developed in-house, instead being passed to British developer Blitz Games. A new evil by the name of Irwin has emerged, and he intends to collect energy by extracting it from the Spectral Realm. In doing so, he destabilizes the line between the Spectral Realm and Pac-Land, and causes an environmental disaster that threatens to destroy both realms. In order to stop him, Pac-Man must not only team up with his former ghost enemies, but also Orson, the ghost behind Talkman. Notable to this release was the debut of Martin Sherman as Pac-Man, the first time the character had ever had a voice beyond the Hanna-Barbera cartoon. Although Pac's iconic moves are present here, they have all been given some adjustments. The butt bounce is now limited to 3 jumps, but also unleashes a shockwave on the third bounce that can damage enemies. The rev roll could now be cancelled after charging as well. Although players still collect pellets and fruits, instead of the regular pellet throw, Pac-Man now has a punching ability as his primary combat move. Swinging and climbing were also added to spice up the platforming. In certain levels, players also take control of a Talkman mech as a means of defense. Similar to the other games having GBA interpretations, Pac Man World 3 has a DS and PSP port. While the PSP port is pretty much identical to the flagship counterpart, the DS port includes touchscreen-based controls that allow players to direct the rev roll by using the stylus. Otherwise, the DS version follows the same flow as the console, bearing the cutscenes, which are once again slideshows, similar to the GBA games. Pac Man World 3 was released for PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube, and PC on November 15, 2005 in North America, and all of the dates on screen in Europe. The DS and PSP port would also follow on December 5th and 6th, 2005 in North America, and the dates on screen for Europe. This was the first Pac Man World game to not see a release in Japan. Reviews were mixed on release, with some outlets praising the built-upon returning mechanic, while others commented on the lower difficulty and repetitive gameplay. As of the time of this writing, Pac Man World 3 does not have a repack version, although Namco has acknowledged the idea of it in a poll put out to players. They asked if people would be interested in a repack of World 3 or a brand new entry in the series instead. Results of this survey are yet to be known. With any successful platforming franchise, it is almost always to be expected that it will at some point get a racing spin-off. In World's case, that came in the form of Pac Man World Rally, developed by Smart Bomb Interactive and published by Bandai Namco Games. World Rally sees up to 4 players racing at a time as various Pac-Man and Namco characters. For the most part, World Rally plays like any other major kart racer, using a myriad of items against other racers to get first place. On the most unique side, World Rally has what's called the Guardian meter. Once the player drifts enough to fill it, you're granted temporary invincibility towards items. On top of the meter, there are also fruit boxes on each track that set out a fruit for racers to collect. Whoever collects it first gets access to a shortcut somewhere on the course. Finally, if the player collects enough dots on the track, it fills the Pac meter and temporarily transforms the racer into the Pac-mobile, granting extra speed and turning other players into blue ghosts that can be eaten. In terms of game modes, World Rally has your standard Grand Prix, Time Trial, and Battle modes. For battle mode, there are 5 different modes, being Deathmatch, where players must perform a number of eliminations, Free-for-all, where players can take out as many other opponents as they can in a time limit, Last Card Driving, where you want to be the last one eliminated, Binge, where players collect as much fruit as possible, and Classic, where players compete to collect the most pack dots. The only handheld version of this game released was on the PSP, which plays exactly the same as its console counterpart, except it includes a large amount of exclusive content, such as additional characters, new track and battle arenas, and an additional challenge mode. Pac Man World Rally was released for the PlayStation 2, GameCube, and PSP on August 22, 2006 in North America, March 16, 2007 in Europe, and March 29, 2007 in Australia, the GameCube and PSP ports being exclusive to North America. Finally, a PC port would arrive on August 31, 2006, also exclusive to North America. Upon release, the game received mixed to negative reviews, with Screen Rant including it on their list of the 9 worst racing games of all time. I'm personally a huge fan of these games, and would be thrilled with either or both of the options from that survey. With how good the repack versions are of the first 2, I'd love to see 3 get brought into the modern era, and also think that Now Pro could do a good job on a new entry now that they've gotten a feel for the series. I was also happy to finally try the GBA and DS interpretations, even though they were extremely frustrating due to the depth perception, but they're still interesting games to play. No matter what happens, I'm just happy that these games haven't been forgotten. I don't think this will be my last time talking about Pac-Man and the weirder sides of its history, because I've always found it fascinating. In the meantime, if you want to hear more, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.